Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order so we can all get to Pepitos by 7:30.
Oh, no, Tuffy's got Thai food.
Oh, Thai food tonight, Tuffy? Yeah. I'm thinking Mexican. This is a special workshop. I'm going to call this to order, the Destin City Council, August 13, 2018. And we will start with a invocation. But we don't have one, so we'll just do a moment of silence. And then, Kyron, if you would, lead us in the pledge. Thank you very much. All right, tonight, under new business, item A, the City of Destin fiscal year 2019 budget. I think you all got a briefing materials last week, and we will go ahead and turn this over to our budget director at this time.
All right. This is a summation of some of the things that we reviewed with those of you who could make the individual reviews of our budget. This is just a couple of highlights to kind of get us started in our discussion. Our general fund revenue for fiscal year 19, the total general fund revenue increased by about $682,000. It's about a 5.3% increase over our current year. Property values increased by 6.42% from $4.7 billion to a little over $5 billion. Grant revenue increased by $3.2 million. The primary increase there was $2.7 million for the Crosstown Connector grant that we currently have applied, or the county is looking at funding for us. TDD operating funds, which are the funds that we get for the beach and beach accesses, is about $454,000. The Town Center CRA revenue increased in total, and this includes the county contribution of about $86,600. The Harbor CRA increased by about $54,000. From the revenue highlights, from the actual highlights, the property tax value revenue increase was $421,000. So that's about 2/3 of our total $630,000 increase in revenue. We did not raise the millage rate. We kept it at the current millage rate of 1.615. State revenue sharing is up about $33,000. The communication service tax hurt us there. It actually went down about $31,000, and that continues to get hit by the state legislature. They are bound and determined to eventually get rid of that tax or decrease it to the point where it's not a significant revenue fund item for us or any other city in the state. The half-cent sales tax and the municipal tax, they both were up about $64,000 in total. We got almost $50,000 in additional gas tax this year. And then again, the highlights from the grant revenue, $2.7 million is for the Crosstown Connector. Then there's another grant of about $105,000 for the redesign of the curve on Airport Road. There's another grant that's going to come behind that to actually do the construction once that's completed. If that is completed next fiscal year and we were able to secure the grant funds for next year, then we'll come back and do a small budget amendment to add that back into our budget sometime next year. If not, then you'll see it in 2020. The Clement Taylor Park renovations and, of course, the Capitol Royal Melvin Park construction. This is just kind of a graph on you can see where the revenue comes from. As you can see, our taxes are our primary funding source, with fees and grants as our next two largest items. From an expenditure standpoint, our operating expenses increased 7.3% by $847,000. Capital spending was about $733,000. The general fund decreased our contribution to the Town Center CRA this year by about $60,000. Just something of note there. We currently have the town center owing the city of about $2.3 million. Next year, if our projections stay true, will be the last year that the city has to loan any money to the town center CRA to cover its operating cost and debt service. After that, we should see the annual cash flow be in the black and start repaying that $2.3 million. Probably somewhere around 2026, 2027, we should be completely repaid, and at that point we'll start having positive cash flows to turn into some kind of projects within the town center. The sheriff's contract increased to $2.16 million. That was a $185,000 increase, about an 8.87%. $106,000 was for the actual operating cost of the sheriff, and there was an additional, well, actually $80,000 is the operating cost. There's $106,000 is for an additional inspector that they're requesting in this year's budget, and I'm sure if you have any questions, the sheriff's here to discuss that. And then the beach TDD funding was, again, $454,000. This just kind of breaks out where all our costs are and kind of how they are in relation to all the departments: community development, public works, culture, recreation, the TDC administration. That's just a simple graph to kind of give you an idea of how that spending is. Capital project funding is about $6 million. This is how it was funded. $272,000 is from the general fund, $700,000 is from the gas tax, $340,000 is from impact fees, grants of $4.7 million, and the harbor CRA of about $5,000. And these are the projects that we have budgeted for next year. They are listed in your handout that we gave you, but I'll just give you all a second to kind of look at that rather than read through all of them. But that's where all the funding will be spent next year when it comes to our capital improvement program, in addition to anything you might want to change or add tonight.
What handout are you talking about has that listed? Not the big packet.
It's on your capital project spending on the next, I think the third to the last page.
Okay.
From a personnel standpoint, we budgeted 81 full-time positions next year and 17 part-time positions. We have budgeted a 2% COLA and a 2% merit. Our health insurance increased by 3.27%. That's something that came to y'all about a month or so ago. From a position, new positions, we do have a new park maintenance custodian that's going to cost about $34,000. That position is a combination of about 3 part-time positions into that 1 full-time position. We have a new maintenance tech custodian and a mechanic maintenance tech, and those are all budgeted currently in the budget for next year. You had asked me about our legal fees and what we've spent over the last 4 or 5 years. I believe it was the mayor that had asked me to bring this. I hope you can read that. It's a little small. But our city attorney...
Greg, I actually had a question. I reviewed my invoices for the 2017 year, and we only actually invoiced the city $87,000 and change. So if you're reporting more money to us, I'd appreciate a check to make up the difference.
I'd have to go in and look. It may be something that we did with Jerry Miller at the end of the year when he was transferring over and y'all were coming in. That could have been that. That's just what was charged to that account over the last 12 months. No. But the unique thing about...
You suck up for that extra $5,000, Jeff?
You got to remember that prior to fiscal year 15 and 14, Jerry Miller was on a straight retainer contract, and that pretty much accounts for what his contract was, plus maybe some additional fees for some additional work that he did. But for the most part, that is his retainer and expenses. Same thing with the land use attorney in fiscal year 15 and 14. That was Scott Shirley's retainer plus any additional expenses he might have. Plus, he also handled our code enforcement hearings and things like that. We don't use the franchise attorney very much. That's kind of a unique item, so it's kind of an anomaly because we don't normally have a lot of need for the franchise attorney. But as you see, prior to this year, we really didn't spend much of anything. The labor attorney also, we really don't use him very much. It's really for a lot of informational help for our HR department and specific issues, but it's not a real big expense. The other is, that is primarily outside lawsuits where we have to hire an attorney or a firm, something legally that we have to work on. I really don't remember what happened in 2014, but you can see how much it dropped from one year to the next. And we really haven't used a lot this year from the standpoint of outside litigation. And then, of course, you see what's...
I do have a question, though, because under land use, I know Ms. Copp's handling some matters which would be considered some things the insurance company might easily handle. And I know in 2014, in that time frame, Jerry Miller's firm, he was with the Pleat and Perry law firm, and they did a lot of that type of work for the city. And so shouldn't Kim's numbers be adjusted to kind of reflect her numbers aren't quite as high?
Not unless she gives us a bill breaking out as a separate suit. I know that Scott Shirley did a good job with breaking, when it was litigation, he would send us a separate bill with the litigation listed on it. A good example would be the BI Inc. City lawsuit. He would send us a separate bill for any work that he did with that. From Ms. Kopp, I've never gotten anything. It's all one bill. It's not itemized out. It is itemized out by day, by type of work, but I can't go in and decide how much is this, how much is that. But that might be part of what we see here. I don't know. And then and in fiscal year 18, that is the expense only, but that's only through the July billing or the 7-month billing. So we still have, or no, excuse me, that's July. We have 2 months left to post in this year, in this fiscal year.
I have a question.
Sure.
You mentioned insurance settlements, as in litigation fees would be included in the other. I'm thinking, wouldn't that be covered by the insurance company, such as the scenario we're currently facing? I'm going back to 14 and looking at that number, and I'm just trying to think. And what would it be otherwise like for this year?
Well, it could be anything. I would have to specifically pull the bills out and see what it was related to. But everything that happens legally is not covered by insurance. And I think that's what you see in 14. I mean, it's no different than a claim that you might make at your house. You might have a deductible. You might have a certain amount. It might be an 80-20 cut split like that, something like that.
So would deductibles be part of the other?
It could be, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And these are the fees that some cities around us, similar sized cities, I just pulled Fort Walton Beach, Crestview, and Niceville, what they've paid over the last 4 years. Now, granted, they don't have the development that we do, and they don't have some of the litigation that we do, but it certainly shows you from similar sized cities kind of what they're looking at from a litigation standpoint. Probably the cheapest out of all of them is Niceville. They have an attorney on a retainer of $3,000 a month. And he primarily comes to their council meetings and offers as a reference for writing ordinances and resolutions, reviews things like that. And I don't know that he gets involved with code and things like that, but he would be the person they would draw in if they needed it. That's why it's not a straight $36,000. If you look in fiscal year 17, their total cost was $55,000, so they spent about $20,000 over that in things that weren't contracted under their retainer. And this year they're at about $40,000 through the end of last month. And I don't think any one of these three cities also has a land use and a city attorney. I think they just have one attorney who handles everything. And that's kind of the budget in a whole. I'm here to answer any questions. I think everybody's here can answer anything you need. Anything you'd like to add, any changes, I would like to hear the discussion on that.
I had asked, and we had discussed in our meeting on this, about looking at a 5% overall pay increase and a 10%, and about what those costs would be. And I believe you'd mentioned it was about $200,000 for a 5% raise. Is that correct?
That's correct. 200,000 for a 5% and a little over 400,000 for a 10%. That includes the cost of Medicare and the cost of our thrift plan included in that. So that would be the total cost to the city.
So you just take the COLA raise as 2%? So
Correct.
just times it by 1.5?
By 2 and then multiply it by, yeah. It's about $36,000 per percent.
As another thought, it was brought to my attention that we don't give a birthday holiday, and I'm wondering, I know a lot of universities, a lot of government entities do. What sort of an impact would that be for like an 8-hour day for each employee with the 2 weeks prior or within their birth date, something of that nature? And is that something y'all have done before?
Not since I've been here. Lance, since you've been here, I guess Karen's probably the longest tenured. No, that's not something I guess we've ever done here.
I was just coasting along here. Kyron, would you like to ask something?
Yeah, I talked to Lance a few minutes ago, and back in May, I had talked to Lisa at the community center. One thing lacking at the community center is that we are using standard household refrigerators in the kitchen. I'd like to see if we can figure out how to find a little bit of money to put some Sub-Zero fridge and freezer, a commercial brand in there somehow. I don't know if it's in our budget. I had talked to her about it in May, and I said I would make sure it got brought up. So we can find something that we can do there. I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Braden?
Hey, thanks. I just had a couple of questions just for my own interest. In there, page 11, community center rent was $32,000. I'm looking at that right? It's under our charges for service. So community center rent's $32,000 and community center program $78,000.
Is that the third and last page?
No, sir, it's page 11 of 11.
I don't have a pretty binder.
I thought we all got one.
We all have these.
Still digging, Bragg?
I think he's got a different copy than we do.
Page 11
the
is
pages are different?
is the finance budget.
Oh, this is in this.
The current year fiscal budget.
Let me get this one.
That's the budget that we're in right now. I think that most everybody is looking at this document right here.
I don't know that I got that copy. I don't think I did. So I was looking at that one.
While you're looking at that, I want to, Ms. Ramswell and Mr. Dixon, these questions you asked about the pay raise, stuff like that, do we want to, do you want to make a motion that we evaluate it, or are we just bringing stuff up? And it's my first budget meeting, workshop, so.
Go ahead.
If it's okay, I met with Karen today, and Karen Janowski, I'm sorry, and Human Resources Director. And she was telling me that we did and I seem to remember a pay and benefit analysis that was done maybe a couple of years ago. Last year, they were able to, they kind of phased it in 3 parts, and the 3 parts were the people that were on the lower pay scale, and then they did it in the medium, and I would say that would be your not your department heads, but your managers within your organization in the medium. And then the people that are the department heads, I guess, would be the third phase of the possibility of bringing them in line with the surrounding communities and like-sized cities and things like that. We were able, my understanding, to implement it last year for the people that were on the very bottom of the pay scale. Right now, it's a consideration, or could be a consideration, to try to do something with it here that we are now for the people that are in the middle of it. And, you know, with that, I'd kind of like for Karen to maybe explain it a little bit and to maybe see if we can. One of the things I think we don't want to do is we don't want to just go and do a blanket pay raise, because what will happen is that it could further complicate any kind of pay disparities or any kind of where we'd have people that are been here for a longer period of time, actually somebody, because of higher dates and things like that, actually jump over people in pay. So I think that if we can come up with a way to make it to where we could implement this possible middle section of this pay improvement plan, then we could maybe do a thing where we would give you that pay raise or a certain amount, percentage, or whatever it may be, in lieu of, if that didn't give you a raise for this year or something like that. But I would like for Karen to be able to explain the steps that we have basically implemented and where we could go with some of this funding for the raises for the employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Yes, we met earlier, and for the folks, council members that weren't here previously, we went out to Evergreen Solutions to look at a wage and class study. We hadn't had one done in a long while. They came back with over $284,000 worth of increases, changes. So unfortunately, that was just not within our reach. So we asked them to come back with a more understandable idea of costs. So we were able, I believe it was around 20 individuals or so, and there were multiple positions within that, but we were able to take care of, like Mr. Dixon said, Councilmember Dixon said, a few of the very frontline folks. So I felt that was appropriate to make sure that, you know, we didn't just put this on the shelf and let it collect dust for another 10 years. So this last year, when I was out medical leave for my husband and stuff, and I was just doing a lot of research, putting a lot of time and effort into a phase 2, which would take care of that next sort of levels of individuals that we weren't able to do last year. So this is about 26 individuals, 17 positions, and I looked at multiple different surveys within the state, and it has come to about a $65,000 cost for those changes. So within each position, it's different. It's not 5% or 3%. It varies based on minimum market. So I wanted to get them to the minimum market within like positions of the state. But also it's complicated because you have to look internally, like Councilmember Dixon said, you have to look internally to make sure everything fits into piece based on our pay scale and based on where Evergreen Solutions slotted all of those positions. So hopefully that's understandable. I'm happy to answer questions on that. But what Councilmember Dixon also asked me to do was, okay, well, based on what I have here, provide a just flat 5% on all of those positions that were on this phase 2. So the flat 5% on all of these positions is actually less. It's $38,511. So it's actually less, and there's less individuals affected with just the flat 5%. So you've got a couple of options for that, and Bragg's the money man, so based on those numbers, where those dollars can come from, he'll have to answer that one.
Okay, because I got a question for her. So you could provide us then some documentation on, I don't think we necessarily have to have the names, but by position, and so we could evaluate by position how the impact and whether we'd want to do 5 or 10% versus just a flat across the board increase for all the folks. I'm really in favor of a scaled, directed approach to people that are being underpaid for their position in compared with the market, because if we do flat 5%, the people that are already at the higher end will get a 5% raise, and the people at the lower end get a 5% raise, but they're still not up to the industry standards. So that makes it tough for some, for a person to swallow. So I like your approach a lot better, but I think just so we could do a better job of deciding on how much we would like to go, we may decide to do a 10% for those 17 positions or what have you. So can we put together a package that we can actually evaluate it through our briefing materials and then make motions and pass something here at the council level?
Yes, sir. I have copies of my spreadsheet. I've taken the names off with that because I don't want to, squash morale as well. So if this, information is there, then, and it can't happen, I don't want it to do a negative effect as well. But I've got copies for you. I can provide them to the clerk or give them out now if you'd like. But yeah, it also has that 5% flat. And then I can highlight the column which has the difference comparable.
It does have job titles though, right, on it? I mean,
This has got job acronyms because the spreadsheet is quite big, so if I tried to put the whole position title on there, but I can edit that and redo it and send it out, email if you'd
can you
like.
give us an index for it, and then that way we can figure it out?
Yes, I would have to email that out separately if that's okay. Okay.
All right, that answered my question. Next, oh no, Chatham, you're up, sir.
Thank you. About 18 months ago, before last budget cycle, we had a 7-0 vote up here about getting some banner poles on Main Street, and it never came back to us. So it's not in this year's budget.
I don't want to say that it's not. I mean, there's probably enough money within our public services maintenance budget to put those in. I just don't know what the cost of that is specifically, and
Sure. We've had 18 months to figure it out. I know it's not your fault or your fault, but it's one of the things I'm frustrated with, a 7-0 vote that never came back to us.
I know we've discussed it. I think I'm just not sure if it's specifically in here or not. I'll have to look and let you know.
Okay. Yeah, if you could get with Dave, because and I can pull the minutes from the previous meeting, but yeah, we had a vote. Rarely do we have 7-0 votes, and I think it's something this council wanted to move forward with at the time. I know Skip's relationship to Main Street. I'm sure he would probably be on board with it. And also, regarding our city manager salary, that's budgeted in there at 130?
At 123, I think. It's the current level plus the 2% COLA and 2% merit.
Okay.
So it probably is close to 130 in total.
Okay. I know at a couple meetings ago, Ms. Ramswell brought up, Dr. Ramswell brought up some statistics on the city manager position being low, maybe not for the area, but for the state of Florida, even with our population size. And then if you kind of take into account the fact that we are actually a much larger city than our population suggests, then we're even woefully lower in terms of our city manager salary. And so in order to attract the type of, larger city talent that we may need to solve some of these problems, we may need to increase our budget for the city manager salary. I'm happy to have that debate, but I remember seeing some numbers from the Florida League of City. I don't have them on hand, and they were our area was very low, at the city of Destin. And to attract the talent, I think we need to tackle some of the problems that we have and kind of the organizational leadership that this job may require with how dysfunctional our city, can be at times, especially today. So, and that's not criticizing anyone here. It's just we have some very big challenges that we've had a hard time fixing for a long time now. And so I think it may take somebody of perhaps a skill set that we might not have had here at City Hall before to handle these problems and to have some staying power. So.
You have a recommendation, something to start with to help them?
No, maybe, Preble, if you could get those statistics, if you have them. I remember you
I
read
have
some
them
off.
at home.
So they came from the Florida League of Cities. I think it's accessible information. So,
Karen, would you like to address that?
If you don't mind, I can bring some numbers back as well, because doing all of this survey for the other folks as well, I've got those numbers from the state of Florida. So I'd be happy to bring those back to you guys before the next budget meeting.
and those were the numbers we kind of discussed with Buzz.
I can make sure to coordinate with him and communicate if this is what he's seeing.
Okay.
But likewise, they're
Yeah,
pretty.
and I think it was a sample of 100 cities, maybe,
Yep.
in the state that reported information, so.
Yep,
Thank
I
you.
can do that.
We'll have to vote on that.
If you want, if what you would like prior to our first budget hearing in about 3 weeks, if Karen and, well, I guess whatever Ms. Ramswell comes up with, we can come up with a, what you might feel like is more appropriate salary. We can go ahead and try to work that into the budget so that we can have a slight discussion on our first budget hearing as opposed to trying to hash it out then. We can go ahead and try to work that into the budget prior to then if you'd like.
I'm a complete layperson here, and I don't have the numbers handy, so I'm not even going to try to guess a number, but
I could guess a number. I remember the numbers we were talking about. I mean, it needed to be well north of 150. I mean, to be competitive, we needed to be closer to 200, if I remember Ms.
That was the
Ramswell's.
number I had, was 180 to 200.
Yeah.
and what's, Brad, what is our total budget this year? What's the number?
The total general fund budget is $12.5 million.
Okay.
Right at, well, actually, yeah, right at 13 million.
Okay, and I know government is not a business, but if I did have a business that had $13 million in revenue, the head of that would be receiving at least $150,000.
A couple of people on the list, but first I want to ask a question. Seeing how we're advertising for a city manager position is probably something that we need to kind of get settled fairly quickly, I would think.
Most of the positions that, the avenues that I've gone out to advertise already, I think a lot of folks is understanding it's a contract and it's negotiable, and I've put a range on there, but also I put in the comments, contract negotiable, just so they know that, because a lot of the advertisement sites require that blank to be filled for the dollar. But I think a lot of the folks know that it's negotiable, and I've made sure to make sure that it's a contract and it's that understanding.
Okay.
As someone who had to bid before, I think if y'all get it out there, though, as soon as you can, like the amount you want to give them, and if it's something that's pretty attractive, you're going to get a lot of candidates and probably some high-quality ones. And so if they know that number's out there, it's just much.
So what's the timeline on us accomplishing that? A, for Bragg to be able to put it in the budget, for B, you to advertise, and for us to make a decision. That's the range we want to work with. What's our timeline there to get that done? Because we are in the time-sensitive deal. I mean,
Yeah, if you'd like to do that, I've already started advertising, and so the position's going to be advertised, I believe, until the 2nd of next month. So some of those advertisements require $, so I put sort of a range, not to be too greedy, but, to throw some money out there to give it a range. But some of those advertisements are already out there.
What range did you put in the advertisement?
I think I went to somewhat close to where she was when she started, which was 112, was that. But again, I also put contract negotiable because understanding that we don't have control over that besides you as a council and that individual.
So you put the max at about 112?
Yes, I did.
Wow. Now see, I think the people that we're talking about looking at 170 to 200 would look at that and go, no way. So I'm worried that we would miss out on some applications.
But we still have time to update those.
Okay.
And with Mr. Eddy and his advice on the salary and the survey that I've got, I can call him first thing tomorrow and make sure that those changes get done if you'd like to provide a certain dollar amount.
Thanks.
Well, all right, well, those are eye-opening numbers. Let's go with Mr. Oberdeer, and then I got you next, Tuffy.
Okay, so Karen, I want to get back to this conversation you and Duffy had. So last year, we looked at I guess, I don't know what we call them, level 1, level 2, and level 3. Last year, we looked at the level 1 employees, and we said there was a disparity between them and what the market was. And so we raised their salaries to meet the market?
Yes, sir, we did.
Okay, so that to me kind of sets, I don't know if you want to call it a precedent, but it's kind of seems to me like that's then now our standard. Now, if I'm a level 2 employee, and now we're going to do the next step of this project, but now you're telling me we're going to change directions, and we're not going to give me what the level 1 employees got. And so I'm not, and I know that, and I've listened to the numbers, and I don't know where the numbers are going to come from. I mean, Brad can worry about the numbers. I can't worry about numbers. He'll have to go find the money somewhere, and he can take it out of my pay if he has to. But I think we need to figure out a way to make it happen so that the level 2 employees get the same consideration and get brought to the same level as the level 1 employees. Otherwise, it seems to me like we're going to just create a whole bunch of hate and discontent. That's just my feeling on it.
Mr. Dixon.
I'm always worried when he clears his throat.
I got no problem with trying to better the salary to attract a more suitable city manager. I do not have a problem with that. What I think that we will have a problem with is if we raise the salary for the city manager's position, by $50,000, and we don't do something that best we can for basically all the people that fall under that position. I think what we're doing is we're creating a problem for down the road. I don't have a problem with this, and I know the city manager is completely different from the rest of the employees, but I will tell you now that as soon as the city manager walks in the door making $170,000 a year, the person that's been here for 10, 15 years, whatever it may be, that's making 80 or 90 is going to be thinking that they can get up to that certain level or close to that level. And I just don't think that we can do that for all the employees. But I don't have a problem with increasing the salary range for the city manager, but I just don't know that we can go up to high as some of the numbers I've heard here tonight. I would like to see us shoot for a range of from like 140 to 170 or somewhere around there, and I could go with that, and I think that we would attract some very good candidates with that amount of money, and I think that we still could do that and do what I think need to for the employees as well. Another thing too that we haven't even talked about yet tonight or anything, that the money that we will carry forward in this budget. In other words, there'll be a certain amount of money that we will not spend within this budget. Now, all of this I know cannot be put on salaries because you got to have the same amount to again do the same thing the next year. But I do know that we will bring forward a substantial amount of money in this budget to be able to utilize for these things that we're talking about now. Last year, I think it was, and I asked Bragg before the meeting, I think it was 300,000, 400,000. I remember in the years past, it's certainly been a lot more than that. but at least we're going to bring in some extra money by the money we did not spend this year, in this year's budget. So, and we have had a lot of people leave, and so with that, we've saved some money in the budget where we are. I think we'll carry forward a good bit of money this year, and I think that money could be utilized to do some of these things that we're talking about.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Was it Mr. Buzz that was here not long ago? His comment was on the city manager, you know, whether he find one or if we go out for a search firm. And the words out of his mouth is you get what you pay for. And we've dealt with city managers. Kyron's dealt with 5 so far. And, I mean, I can't base it off of, you know, I know we got staff making $80,000, $90,000. Is that correct? I mean, any other place you go, it's, you know, their staff's making $10, $12 an hour, and the manager's making, you know, $30,000, $40,000 a year. So I think, you know, if we're going to get what we pay for, we've got to get on up there and pay somebody something. If not, we're going to get the has-beens, the wannabes, you know, assistant city managers that we've been getting from other places. And like I think it was Mr. Parker said, you know, yeah, we got 13,000, but we got, you know, 80,000 people here during the summer. We got a lot more politics and a lot more corruption in this little B town. And we got to have somebody that can deal with it and knows how to handle it. So I would be willing to, you know, to try to see if we couldn't get up to the $180,000 range to get somebody, you know, that's get what we pay for.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Marler?
Actually, both. This is back on the budget. In the past, since I've gone through 5 city managers, we've worked with the city manager on having what I consider a living wage, what they need to live on, and then most of the time, any other funds such as merit colas and things of that nature were put into their retirement fund. So that's one thing to look at, to consider, is that's one of the things that most of our city managers in the past have done, is we kind of sort of come up with a living wage that they're comfortable with, that takes care of all their bills and whatever they have, and then anything extra is put into their retirement fund. On the employee side of that, I understand, Karen, do we have in place, like in the case of Mr. Johnson and Mr. Schmidt, they went and did some extra, extra activities and got, for certifications and stuff. Is that part of what we look at when we're looking at this level system that Mr. Dixon was talking about?
That is also one of the things I've been tackling, along with the phase 2, is a progression. I've researched other organizations. I've asked for their policies on certification dollars based on whether it's a shop mechanic certification, whether it's a flagger, whether it's a AICP. So I've tried to reach out to multiple organizations to work on a progression phase. And I feel, instead of the $280,000 worth of stuff, we can sort of empower our folks to get those certifications needed for the positions and to give them a little bit of money to say, well, thank you, we appreciate you getting those certifications needed for your position, advancing themselves into the position, and it's a lot less heartache on the budget. And so I've been trying to work on that as well, besides this phase 2. We've started it earlier on, before I was in this seat, with building inspectors. And so last year we started with our code enforcement officers for their FACE certifications needed for that position. The other thing, just recently with this last year's budget, we started with the park ranger. So that requires a FACE certification and different things for a park ranger. So there's smaller avenues that we are currently working on, and I would like to expand that to all of the different levels. Of course, we'd have to look at the job description and make sure that that's a requirement of the job description. So it's got, alternate things that we need to do.
How would that include if they wanted to move to a different position at a later date?
Yes, of course, that would help with internal movement and when positions open up and those kinds of things. We're also, with the CPM certifications that Lance and Stephen both obtained, one of the taskings for their class project was succession planning. So that will be something I'm going to try and tackle this year to see what we currently have staffing-wise, who has what levels of certifications, what degrees that they have, so we can see when a position opens up and reach out and say, okay, we've got this individual that is, that can fit into this position and right now. Because I feel that what we're lacking is a lot of middle management. We've gotten really, we squished ourselves with all the downturn of the economy, and so we don't have a lot of middle managers to be able to step into those next director roles, or for individuals to take that kind of baby step into that middle manager and then ultimately work them through, our organization and keep them for longer periods of time.
That kind of training, I know in the oil fields, if you want to upgrade your license or get better certifications, they get a good employee and who may be starting out as a deckhand or an engineer, and they want to, he's cap material. Some of these schools are $15,000, $18,000, $20,000. They'll pay for their schooling, but they just have to extend their contract. Are we paying for any of these certifications? Is that part of what the city does?
Yes, sir. Job related is paid for. So if it's a course or some kind of a conference, that's budgeted within travel, memberships, and training. If it is outside of their job, we have an education reimbursement, which has those stipulations of staying with the city for so long. And if they leave, then they need to pay back a certain percentage. So we do have both of those avenues currently.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you. To kind of ease Tuffy's concerns about the city manager pay, I think what I have in my mind is seeing the numbers from the Florida League of Cities and basing my decision on a range off of a town of, and we can make that number up at 50,000 people. What's a city of 50,000 people pay a city manager in the state of Florida? And I think it's a lot higher than what we pay now, and I think it might be around 140, 150, whatever it is. I think we need a little more. So I would like to see those statistics.
I'm going to say we've got a meeting Monday night.
That'd be great.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be
and we can make a decision.
Yeah, I
or,
think
excuse
so.
me, if you'd like to
Sure.
make a decision then.
Yeah. Is that fine? Okay. And then one last thing regarding code enforcement. Do we have anything for code enforcement officers on the beach?
Capacity.
Do we have a code enforcement officer budgeted to meet the needs of the beach? Is he splitting his time the beach and the harbor?
Yeah, I really can't
Yeah,
talk to specifically what their duties are, but we do have, 3 code enforcement officers and a working supervisor, so that you basically have 4 officers that are out there at any given time.
Okay. Lance, I know you got a lot on your plate. At the next meeting, the editor of the Daily News had an editorial come out, and he had 4 questions that the city really didn't answer. If you could look at those 4 questions and get with Kim Kopp or Jeff and try to get some kind of clarification for the public on Monday, because they are important questions. And then, yeah, thanks.
All right. Mr. Braden.
Thanks. Where do we stand on the city manager? I know you have advertising, but where do we stand as far as hiring a search firm? Are we just waiting to see what we get through what you're advertising, or?
I believe the direction that I understood at the last meeting was for me to advertise with the assistance of Mr. Eddy for the position. I don't recall that there was a consensus or a motion for an RFP for a recruiting firm to do any of that. I can go back and make sure, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, now that you say, I don't think we did either. So if we feel like we don't get anybody that's qualified through that, I guess our next step would be go through a search firm.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that next Monday, just do a time frame or something. If we don't get X amount of respondents in next 21 days, and we look at a recruiting firm or something like that.
Real quick, I remember, because I was the one who actually asked Mr. Eddy the question. He said you could do both processes at once, and he said he could mix them, maybe have the expert tell you what you need to be asking for to market it correctly too. They might have some information, but so there's y'all can do it any way you want. You can do them at the same time.
Yeah, he did. I do remember saying that. So if we want to go ahead and bring that, somebody can bring that up in Monday's meeting, and we can go ahead and vote to put out an RFP and use the League of Cities people. Ms. Ramswell.
Thanks. I actually wanted to turn to Code Enforcement Division. Looking at 2017, it looks like we paid out $124,000 in salaries. How many people did that cover?
I believe we had the 4 people in the department at that time.
4 people?
Correct.
Okay, so when I look at the beach operations, there's an additional salary for 109. What is that for?
The hold on just one second. Are you talking about in the Code Enforcement Division?
It's actually account 0157291 under beach operations, and it lists salaries as 109.5.
Okay. That's for the TDC reimbursed funds, and I believe that might include 1 code officer. Am I correct, Lance?
I can talk about that. It includes 3 full-time staff people right now who, up until the beginning of June, were all 3 positions were park maintenance positions. At the beginning of June, 1 of our staffers got certified level 1 and certified parking enforcement, so that's our ranger. So 1 of the 3 has the credentials as ranger, which is the same as level 1 code.
And that's for the beach operations item?
Correct.
So we have 3 people whose salaries add up to 109? Okay, and so then if one of them is the park ranger, that's not included in code enforcement, or it is?
They're not included in code enforcement. It's a pilot program that we just started. We're only in the 2nd month. The concept being, we've had great rules on the books forever and ever in our parks, but we've never had the ability to truly enforce them. So this gentleman, or in the future, a lady could be doing it for us too, but they have that extra tool when education and please don't do that don't work anymore, and they can actually issue citations in our parks.
Okay, excellent. So that line item then for beach operations and salaries is going to be the person you're talking about, and others that are dedicated from parks and maintenance to do extra work that's on the beach? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, it's a combined position, and that's typical in the Parks and Rec field. And thank you for asking me something I really know about. So,
it was planned.
Thank you. That is very typical within Parks and Rec, where they're still maintenance. They still have maintenance responsibilities, but they're also going to help educate the public. They're going to enforce rules that we have on the books, and eventually, if we want to, and we hopefully will get to this point too, they could be the folks who are opening and closing our parks for us, and would have the ability to have people leave our facilities when they're closed.
Okay, excellent. So then now I turn back to the code inspections as it's listed, and I guess that's really code enforcement as it's listed on the beginning overall budget. So I look, last year's budget was 124, and I see that the revised budget for 2018 is 223, and then for 2019 it's 215. So are we saying that there's just 4 people that are comprising the 215? Does that include the manager, or so that does include? So that's 4 people.
It's the 4 code officers, and then they have an administrative person that works with them that was added last year. So that's why you see kind of the big jump there.
Okay, so what I'm getting at with all of this is the fact that we're still having significant issues with code enforcement. And I'm wondering, is it that we need to add additional officers? Is it that they're not being utilized in such a way that's potentially most beneficial? I don't know. I mean, do we have people working the hours where we're getting the most calls? Or do you need us as a council to look at adding yet another officer? Because I know one of those is supposedly dealing only with short-term rentals, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
And then one you're saying is a manager, so that leaves 2 code enforcement officers that are out roving. And that does not sound adequate to me for the problems we have. I mean, am I wrong? I mean, just is that enough? Or?
It might be adequate for about 5 months out of the year, but not.
Yeah, so. Go ahead.
I don't know if they've had the proper oversight, direction, maybe. I don't know if throwing another person, another salaried position at the problem's going to solve it, because we get a lot of complaints about just inadequate code enforcement, not inadequate code enforcers. You know, if you look at our beach issue, I think we have a lot of codes that aren't currently being enforced. And that's...
Yeah, and so that's what it boils down to.
I think I would give it a, try to get a really good city manager in here and explain to him our issues and give it a shot before we throw more money at the problem.
Lance, or Mr. City Manager, have you had a chance to look at that or evaluate this particular department at all yet? I know you've got a lot on your plate.
I've looked at it some, and my initial opinion of our staffing levels is that they're probably too low. The staff that we have has been pulled to the priority items that this council has pushed them towards, the short-term rentals and the parking, and the parking enforcement is taking up a great deal of our code enforcement's time. So I'm not saying that's the only issue, but I certainly think that in the future, if we could increase the number of code enforcement officers, it would help us try to accomplish. We have good rules in a lot of areas, just like the Rangers. We need people to help enforce them. Yeah.
Is the short-term rental registration income included in this number to pay that particular officer? Like
It is. It pays that officer in full.
Okay. And that's right, something with the livery vessels. What? Okay. Obviously, the point tonight is to figure out if we need to set aside or talk about funds for an additional officer, which is why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if an additional officer would be enough. I think that's one of the first things we're going to have our new city manager do is really evaluate where we're at. And there might be a situation, you look at some of these salaries, I mean, who can live on $35,000 a year? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well,
So-
and that's the point. I mean, I don't want to have to wait a whole other year for another budget cycle to try to address the fact that if we need someone, we need to try to deal with it now and not.
But I think if you listen to the mayor and this individual evaluates the code department and finds that we do need an additional person, then we will add that position and do a budget amendment at that time to include that in our budget that year, that later in the year, as opposed to just budgeting it and saying you have this to add at some point. So I think that's a good idea to let him or her evaluate it. If they find we need to put a position in there, we'll do a budget amendment and we'll add it in there, and we'll hire that person and go from there.
So obviously, I'm not an accountant, but when you said do a budget amendment, you're going to be pulling that money from somewhere, right? Wouldn't it make sense to set it aside in the department that it would be utilized for, and then if it's not utilized?
You're going to be
then-
pulling it from somewhere right now. I mean, I'm going to have to cut it from somewhere to put, because the budget is balanced in
I guess
whole.
I like nice, neat little rows that say potential code enforcement officer under that item, and I know that's not how it works, but that's how I think, so.
But it might be easier to do it when we only have to fund it for 4 months, 5 months. Maybe this person, the new city manager comes in, by the time they get up and running, have a chance to evaluate that position, we start getting into spring break, and they say, hey, let's throw another body in there, go ahead and see if this will help solve the problem that I see, and we can do the budget amendment and fund it. We only have to fund it for maybe 4 or 5 months, as opposed to a full position with all the benefits and everything for the whole year. So it's a little easier to do it later in the year than it is to do it right now, because I will have to pull a full salary, benefits, everything.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's such a hot button item. I think we can make that one job 1 or priority 2 or something of the new person who's hired. In the meantime, I guess our code enforcement people and our interim city manager are just going to have to step up to the plate and work a little harder until we can address that, as difficult as that may be.
Ask a legal question to the sheriff's deputy, Mr. Nix, over here real quick, because they might have a solution through their contract, and I was curious if they might have a funding source through that.
Yes, no problem. Then I got Mr. Dixon.
Well, you can let Mr. Dixon go first if you want.
No, go ahead. We got Mr. Nix is
Captain
right
Nix,
here. Come on up.
Is there any possible way, or have you heard in the past through these contracts that y'all enter into with various municipalities, but assigning one deputy who will be solely assisting code enforcement for any local municipality, or helping them out and supporting them in that role?
I haven't, but I'm pretty sure it's possible. We just have to depend on whether or not the sheriff would agree to it, but I don't see why he wouldn't.
And so that's another possibility for y'all is to think about that way, and they actually would be a deputized individual who could probably have a little bit more sway. I mean, I don't want to say sway, but they'll be armed at least. Let's put it that way.
The upside of that is we could, if we could get the sheriff to agree to something like that, we could set some parameters of when we would utilize that officer to help our code enforcement. They wouldn't just be riding around in a truck together, waiting for a call. Right now we're having issues on the beach, of course, and you're probably getting plenty of calls out there as it is, but that would be something that we need. I'd like for you to speak with the sheriff with and get back with me if you could.
Yes, sir. We do help code enforcement with things like parking issues, along with covering the calls for service that we're trying to cover in the city. The city, I'm amazed at how busy this city is. We are tremendously busy, and it doesn't slow. It's a constant thing. But we try when it comes to parking issues and things of that nature that code enforcement would normally, if they were capable, if they were the manning was right for them, that they could go out and aggressively seek these issues in Crystal Beach where all the people are having parking issues and stuff like that. We try to address those when code enforcement's not available, and we get a call. I've gotten calls from a couple of council members to, can you go out and check on this? I've had somebody call me about it. But I'm not telling you that the sheriff wouldn't entertain it, but I'll definitely ask him. I'll see him tomorrow and ask him and see what he says.
That'd be great. Thank you, sir. Mr. Dixon.
Not to belabor the city manager salary thing.
But you are.
No, I just want the council to please think about this, and I'm not saying I won't go along with a substantial increase in the salary, but please think about this, that most cities have water, sewer, police, fire. There's a lot of things that they have to deal with that this city manager does not have to deal with. And I think that without the garbage collection, with everything else that city managers have that cities have, the ways to fund some of these, these higher salaries and stuff like that. But one of the things I would kind of like us to look at when we're doing any kind of analysis on these other cities is that I know we're very unique in the fact that we have a 2 mil tax cap. That's basically unheard of in the state of Florida. But I would like us to try to find like-sized cities that have about the same population, and I don't care if we use the summertime population, and to make sure that, I got a feeling that as high of salaries I've heard tonight, basically everybody that's a city manager in the state of Florida would want this job. And not to say that we wouldn't get a good city manager out of that, but I just think that for the job, with not having a lot of the responsibilities that a regular city manager would have, I just think that some of the numbers I've heard tonight are very high. But I'm certainly willing to increase where we are now. So,
Are you saying we should buy the power company?
is that what I said?
Yeah, I think he said that so we could find a new revenue source.
I got you. All right, well, you understand what I'm saying, and I'm not saying I disagree with increasing it, but I just think we got to look at the workload and look at everything, and I want, just like what a professional city manager that's going to be with us and come up with new ideas about ways to fix things. So I'm on board with it.
Yeah, I sure hate taxing people through their electric bill. Do it the old-fashioned way. Rodney, be a supporter of raising that bill again, wouldn't you, Rodney? Mr. Destin, you're up next.
Yeah, I was just piggybacking off of what I think Rodney and Preble were saying before about code enforcement and how we need to dedicate real money to code enforcement. I don't think, and I'm very interested in what the potential holds for talking about the sheriff's office and cross-deputizing and getting some folks out there that may get more compliance courtesy of wearing the uniform. I'm anxious to entertain that as well. But at the end of the day, I mean, we need some radical changes, and it's going to come from manpower, and we got to put some money towards it. If the budget amendment process is the way that Bragg's telling us to go when we get this new city manager in here and we put our heads together and he comes up with some good ideas, I'm all ears. But I think we need to really dedicate some real funds to it because it's not working.
Next is Mr. Braden.
Thanks. Yeah, I hope Lance had said, that the staff and the manager had direction from the council to really push on the parking, paid parking, and I think we went from idle to full throttle on that because we got code enforcement that's just sitting down on Cybert, and I went by there several times, and they're just sitting on the side of the road in their truck watching that parking lot for somebody to go in there and park, not pay, they write them a ticket. Chance on collecting on that ticket from somebody from Texas or wherever, it's probably slim to none. So I think we really need to, council, next meeting, I'll bring it up. We can kind of back off that and give the staff direction to ease up on that and go somewhere else and enforce, the codes and ease up on the parking a little bit because that's what we do. We got them just sitting on the side of the road for hours on end watching a parking lot. Where we could stick I think a $1,500 stand there, kiosk, whatever you want to call it, on arm. Takes a credit card, debit card, whatever. If you don't pay, you don't go in. And our biggest problem with code enforcement is we can't enforce it. We've got cases that went to the magistrate, and the magistrate ruled against them, told them to quit, and they're still operating today. And there's really not a whole lot we can do about it. Really?
I think we can re-legislate.
We'd have to do something because there's really not a.
I was really frustrated to hear about the issues going over there on the bayou.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is putting a lien on their property is the way to go. And some of these other communities, especially in short-term rentals, I mean, like Miami Beach, we're talking about fining people $500 or a day. So, I mean, they stepped right up to the plate and they find people $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 and then take them to civil court in the process. So, maybe that's something I think the whole council can look at is to give our code enforcement and our ordinances a little bit more teeth, using the help of our attorneys, of course, you know. They're probably a little bit better at drafting something that would have that teeth, but it is frustrating to give all these notices of violation. It goes to the magistrate violates them as well, and then nothing happens to them.
Just like our livery vessels, we thought we put teeth in that. And I think we still have people operating, that was 2 years ago. And we still have people operating today that still hadn't paid anything.
Yeah, in the marine industry, lots of times when somebody puts a lien on a vessel, the U.S. Marshals come and they chain the boat to the dock. So that's something maybe we can look into.
You guys want to delve into admiralty law?
Real quick on that, I talked to Kim about that earlier today, or I reached out to her to reiterate what y'all told me actually at the last meeting. Councilmember Dixon, you said you wanted to update on Marlar Bayou, and so at the next meeting, she'll give that. But I do agree. The focus, when I was briefly handling code enforcement, when Scott Shirley resigned, there was no focus on the back end of everything. It was all on the, get it in front of the magistrate. He would fine them, and then he'd always kind of release them from the fine at the end. Because he had a big heart, Judge Remington did, and can't blame him there. But there's never been a focus up front to the magistrates to say, don't do that. You're being brought in. Once you come up with the penalty is put in place, and you're not supposed to release people from that penalty. And you can do that, and that's not overreaching by any means. So I think if just kind of from up on top, there's a policy direction to go ahead and start the second phase of, if you get liens on these properties, start looking into enforcing them. That might be something that Kim hears it, and the whole code enforcement division will start focusing on that more.
It's got to be frustrating for a code enforcement officer to write somebody a violation knowing damn well that they're not going to do nothing about it. It would frustrate me if I was writing the code. I'm sure that... You think? Yeah. Ms. Ramswell, get us back on track.
Thank you. I did have a question about the sheriff's contract increase, and I notice it says here that there's an additional inspector for $106,840. Can you elaborate on that? Is that salary only? Is it other expenses? Is that person going to be dedicated to just Destin cases, or what?
Yes, ma'am. What it is, okay, to answer the first part of your question, the 106 is not completely salary. The sheriff was asking for an additional investigator because the Destin investigator that's under contract right now has taken 192 cases in 2017, and the investigator that's working in the unincorporated areas took about 86 to 87. So there's actually a little bit more than a 2-to-1 ratio on what the investigators are tasked with. So he was requesting an additional investigator. The salary, the base salary for the investigator, roughly, don't hold me to it, it's about $52,000. So that along with everything else, it comes out to be about 106.
So does that mean then that we would have 2 dedicated Destin inspectors / investigators?
Yes, ma'am. That would work Destin cases.
Okay, because it seems like before that they work cases that weren't just in Destin, that they would be assigned to other cases as well. Is that going to change?
For the majority of the part, they work their trust me, there's enough in Destin to keep them busy. But like in the case where we have an incident here and you have one investigator, I can get the whole investigation section in Destin working to help with that. So there could be a time, I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't happen, when the investigator has to leave to go help in something else, but that's very rare. They try not to mess with any of the contracted positions unless it's just absolutely necessary. And that was one of the things I was going to ask before we got done, Mayor. Councilman Morgan asked for, after the attorney asked me, Mr. Burns asked me, and then Councilman Destin kind of got me a little confused. Are we looking, if it's cross-deputizing code enforcement officers, that's not going to work. If it's a full-time position to work with code enforcement as a law enforcement officer, then what we'd be looking at is 22 full-time positions if you authorize the investigations position. And I can bring the council back a figure on a contract for that if you want me to do that. But I know the sheriff's hopes is on top of what we already have, the full-time 20 that we have now, is adding that investigator position to help investigations out.
Mr. Dixon.
I truly don't have a problem with the investigator at all, and let me tell you, it's really not so much about the investigator. I feel like we get like street crimes unit when we have major issues here, major drug busts and stuff like that. I mean, we get a lot of extra law enforcement that comes in and helps out and pitches in and things like that. So I truly don't have a problem with paying for an extra investigator, at all. One of the things I'd like to say on the possibility of having law enforcement do some of the code enforcement is, could it be something where we hired some of the off-duty deputies to maybe come in and do some of this work? Where, in other words, I know they do perform functions outside of their normal working hours, but a lot of times we'll have it to where we have part-time deputies that are willing to go and do some extra work. And so could we come back, rather than, what I'm thinking is if we utilize part-time people, we wouldn't maybe have to pay for retirement and everything else that comes involved in that. If we did utilize part-time deputies to help us with code enforcement, I think it could benefit both the deputy and it could benefit the city in some cases. So just something to think about and something for the council to consider. The fact that we may not have to pay for a full-time person, we possibly could use people that would be willing to do the work part-time on a part-time basis.
I can definitely ask, for sure.
I like that.
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you. Yeah, I think with the code enforcement officer, one of the biggest problems I see is that where you would need, the presence of a police officer is probably the beaches. And I think the police officers are spending a lot of time on the beaches now anyways. Short-term rentals would help too, but the point of it is it's a seasonal gig. I mean, it would be tough to justify 12-month or a year-round salary for y'all to assist with code enforcement. How is the Marine unit doing?
The Marine unit is extremely busy.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many rescues the Marine unit has had just at the mouth of the harbor.
Okay.
He has been extremely busy. I can get you before the next meeting his calls for service, how his calls for service have gone up. I've also, I don't know if you are aware, but TDC that pays already for one Marine unit for the bed tax district, plus they pay for the 2 beach units that we have for the bed tax district. I have one that I pull from patrol and put on the beach, which gives me 3 beach units that work between Okaloosa Island and Destin. A lot of times they wind up in Destin because of the amount of people that we have. But the TDC also, for the next fiscal year for 18-19, they're going to fund an additional Marine position that I've already purchased a boat for. So that should help us with, and the good thing that I like about that for our citizens and the people that come out here on our waterways is the fact they're in the bed tax district, so they can work all the waterways between here in the county. So that's here in the bed tax district. So that works out great for us. And it's needed right now because our calls for service on Crab Island have increased tremendously.
Sure.
So
Would you try to bring stats on, the violations, the cited violations, BUIs, no wake violations?
yes, sir.
And I remember it was either last budget cycle or the year before we had discussed a deputy and a wave runner, and the idea behind that was to, did we ever do that?
So we had 2 wave runners that were on a law enforcement loan to us that didn't cost the city anything. Basically, they were fronted to us by Yamaha. The problem with wave runners is if you have a wave runner that rolls over, for instance, if I'll use Bragg as an example since he's sitting next to me. If he rolls off of his wave runner, if I have to save him and trying to get him up on a wave runner, it doesn't work. I mean, the platform is just not good enough for it to work. To run from in certain areas, like in the harbor where we have no wake violations and stuff like that, it's beneficial. But whenever you stop the violator, to right them, it's just not practical for its use. So a lot of times the Marine unit that the city pays for, it's in the city contract, he works off that flats boat that we have, that Pathfinder, because he can walk anywhere on that boat. But to answer your question, yes, we've tried it. Yes, it's difficult. It's even difficult for somebody that's spent their entire life boating. It's difficult.
But all that money that we budgeted for that position was just transferred to a boat.
Y'all didn't have to pay. The only thing that you paid for, that the city paid for, was in this year's contract is we repowered that boat.
Okay.
We put a new motor on that boat. The boat, you did not pay for the boat.
Okay, and are we paying for the position, Bragg? What's the total cost? Do you know, just ballpark, is it 50, 60, 70?
Yeah, I think it was like 57, 50, 60,000.
Looking at our TDC representative right next to me. You want to say?
Make an ask, I'll go carry the football.
$57,000 for a Marine Patrol unit.
That is base. That's just the base pay. When you start talking about what we were talking about earlier, including the retirement and everything that goes with that, it goes up anywhere from $80,000 to $90,000. Depends on how long that person's been with the agency and how much their salary is. And I didn't know this, but workman's comp is a lot higher for a Marine unit than it is for me as a patrol deputy.
Sure.
Don't ask me why. I don't know.
With the growing popularity of Crab Island in our harbor and unexperienced boaters in our waterways, I think it could not hurt to ask the TDC.
Maybe I ought to sign up for that gig. Mr. Marler.
Bragg, number one, I thought last year we budgeted for a wave runner, and since we didn't purchase one, because I think last year the Sheriff's Department asked for a boat and a wave runner, and we went with the wave runner.
That's correct, and they found that the wave runner was inadequate, and so they purchased the boat, or they had a boat, and all that we're doing is helping them upgrade that boat.
Okay,
in the
all right,
coming year.
that's the number one thing. Number two, let's get back on track with something Mr. Braden said, and I was also thinking the same thing. The app system does and does not work for the parking lots. And Mr. Braden alluded to that just a minute ago about getting a kiosk. It's either going to be a kiosk or we need to have it manned and fixed up a little bit and, figure out a fee, I think. And I think that's where we need to go, looking at through the budget too, about either having the kiosks there and the adequate way to in and out, or have it manned. So that's another thing I'd like to look at in the next, when we actually start looking at the real budget, because it ain't working the way it is, because apparently some of the phones cannot download that app, and then you have people who do not use smartphones, and you still use flip phones and older phones because they don't like the smartphones, and so they're not using the app. So two things is I don't think we're getting the proper revenue we should be getting for the parking lots. And then I think we just need to make it more efficient and better for the citizens and everything. And one final thing, and I know it's probably not in this thing, but Mr. James, I think I wrote it down here, James Barnes at the council meeting last had mentioned about the fee, about a fee for the people who are not a residential fee for people who own property here but didn't have, were not residents about Joe's Bayou. I think what we should look at there is that instead of not charging them money, I think maybe we could look at a smaller fee for that. I know that'll come up during a different section when we do the fees, but maybe we can come up with a smaller fee for the property owners, but they're not residents or not living here full time. And that's my 2 cents worth.
All right, Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you. This is actually to Captain Nix, because you were talking about the sled train. Well, we called it the sled. I was one of the few that was selected at the time to take the PWC certification, which was the rescues on the skis. And I'm just wondering, did the officers that were doing that in the Marine unit, did they have that certification? Because you learn, obviously, how to do it one-manned with the catch and the throw onto the back of the sled in all conditions. And I'm wondering if that's something that maybe we could work with the lifeguards, the Destin lifeguards, to help you guys and maybe make that Marine unit with the skis actually work.
I can definitely ask. I know that I looked at a platform over in Fort Walton at the vendor that let us have the 2 wave runners on the law enforcement program. Sea-Doo has a platform that's designed especially for that. It's a very unique system, but they don't offer it under a law enforcement program, or they did not at that time. So coming and asking council for a $28,000 or $26,000 wave runner was probably not adequate for what we were trying to do, with the fact that we only have one person working that system anyway. So it's definitely something that I can find out and talk to the guy that runs the Marine unit, Sergeant Parkton, and see if that's something that they've considered training on, if they have trained on. I know that the TDC positions that the Marine unit that is already filling a position that's paid for by the TDC as the 2 beach units, that's one of their requirements, is for them to be lifeguard certified, for them to hold those positions. That was one of the selling points that we had for the TDC. So that's definitely something that I can ask him, though, because I know they all train together.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that that might be a way, because the fire district is having issues trying to obtain additional wave runners, but yet they have folks that are certified specifically in personal watercraft rescues. So if that's something where y'all could kind of join forces so that you're still meeting that public service need out in the water, that's something that would benefit everybody, I would think, in the long run. So just a thought.
Thank you, Mr. Ramswell. Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. Rodney brought up the Parking Solutions Company, and it jogged my memory. This is not specific to the budget, but could correlate to a potential RFP and whether or not we want to stick with these guys. I was listening to the radio today on NPR, and they were discussing, and I'm afraid it included Parking Solutions, that municipalities were getting in hot water over some of these pay-to-park app companies taking the information from all the people who are using the app and selling it to third parties. Lance, could you and Jeff Burns look in to make sure that that's not happening? And if it is happening, we'll have to make a decision if that's something we care about. So just something that had gone through my mind. And I agree with Kyron's point. Perhaps rather than just giving these folks a basically free use of the boat ramp, perhaps if you pay taxes in the city of Destin but don't live as a full-time resident, let's see if we can find a reduced rate that doesn't terribly impact, because I just don't want us to go backwards. I don't know what the spectrum of use and users is down at the Joe's Bayou Boat Ramp. How much is purely out of town? How much is, and then how much is folks who own property here but are just simply vacationing? So I don't want to rush in and make a change just to appease this gentleman that came in without knowing what potential the impact could be. So that's my feeling on it too.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. And on the Parking Solutions, we do have an RFP out for the group that was presenting our parking garage ideas, and they have team members that do single lot type stuff like that, so it might be an opportunity for us to investigate through that company some other alternative solutions to what we're doing right now. He might be able to bring in, I guess I can call him, and maybe we can get him to bring in some people to give us some other alternatives outside of this electronic app. And then we're making revenue off these parking lots, correct, Bragg? And you've got an estimation on how much income?
Yeah, we're making a little bit of money.
Is it 30,000 for 2000?
I don't think it's going to be. Yeah, well, Steve has the numbers.
All right, well, I'd like to know that. And then Mr. Dixon, you'll be next.
Ran the numbers this morning, effective March 1st through yesterday. The pay-to-park combined parking revenue, which is the full price and including the discount for harbor employees, currently totaled as of the end of yesterday, $40,927.75. The paid citations from the same period from March 1st through yesterday now total $9,268. So the total between the citations and the parking revenue is about $50,200.
How much of that did we get?
We get it's a complicated formula on the parking side, but it's roughly 80 to 85%. On the parking side, on the citation side, basically the fee for the citation is a flat $3 rate. It's $33, so it's a small amount. Basically, it's 10%. So we get 90% of those. Under the old program, when we were going through the clerk of courts, we actually, because we share fees all the way through that process, we actually saw a much lower return on our parking citations.
What percentage of the revenue, not the citations, but the revenue was employees? Employee discounted parking. What percent of the 50,000, 40,000?
That's currently out of the 40,900.
Yeah.
The discounted is approaching 10,000. It's about $9,000 total.
And if you factored in the discounted rate, was that 50% use?
Yes.
So 50%.
Maybe a little less.
A little less. So probably 40% of those lots are being used by employees. So, okay.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dixon. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, a couple things on the boat launch. And, this has got to do with budget because it does have to do with revenue, is that one of the reasons that, and I was one of the main proponents about not charging the Destin residents, is the fact that there wasn't a place for people to park. If everybody wanted to go launch their boat, the people that lived here, that paid taxes here, didn't have a place to park. Now that may be freeing up a little bit, but the gentleman that was here at the last meeting was basically here saying that his mother is the one who owned the property and that he didn't see why he couldn't, as the son of the mother that owned the property, actually get a reduced rate on launching his boat. Now, how far do we go down with this? Do we go to cousins? Do we go to good friends, or
maybe former roommates? I think probably would.
How far do we take this thing down? So basically, we got a pretty good process, and the fact is that I wouldn't care if we lowered it $5 and for everybody and whatever it may be, but if we start that, then the fact is that having being a Destin resident sometimes has its privileges, and the people that don't live here full time for a reason. So
No, I agree with you, Tuffy. I mean, I don't think that guy in particular is the poster child of what I would want to. He doesn't own the property. His mom owns the property, and at some point I go, listen, your mom, sure, I don't care if she gets it for $15 instead of 20, but for you, your mom pays taxes. You're just related to her. I get it, but that's,
Well, the way it's set up is that, of course, if you're a resident, you have to bring your registration for your trailer and your boat to City Hall, and you get a sticker, and it goes on the left side of your trailer, where at the area where the winch is. So the other problem I see with that, I know we got a little problem with that, but then we also have to figure out what kind of way that we're going to be able to show that this person is a taxpayer, owns property and is a taxpayer, but doesn't live here as a resident. So that's the other thing, because it would have to be, if we do the sticker thing, it'd be a different color sticker or something like that, and it would have to be affixed to the trailer in some way or manner. So it's just, I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, the guy did, agreed with you, Parker. I mean, he wasn't the poster child, but he did bring up a good point, that he is technically a taxpayer, or his mother is.
I've had them calling me, too, the people that may live in Fort Walton, about how $20 to launch the boat. And what I've usually told them is that if you move to Destin, you can launch for free there. So, I'm sorry that's the way it is, but that's the way it is. And so, and there's a lot of like library cards and stuff like that. We don't charge as much maybe for a Destin resident as we do for somebody else. So, there is, membership has its privileges.
There you go.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I think we've covered a whole lot of different concerns and needs from everyone. We do have another item on our agenda, but I don't want to go to that until look both ways and see if anybody has anything else they'd like to bring up. Would anybody want to see if anybody in the audience has anything? Jim, would you like to mention a few things?
Come on, Jim, say something.
He was shaking. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I had two quick questions on one of the early slides of the budget. The $5,000 I saw for the Gulf Power easement, that's an awful lot. I didn't know what that was. It's an awful low amount. And at $2.7 million for the crosstown connector, are we starting something here this year? I wasn't sure. Gotcha. And then the 2.7, is that actually, because we still have properties to buy, I think? So, gotcha. I don't want to get into details of that, but I mean, we really can't do much until we get that part done, I don't think. So, okay. And just, there was a comment about the pay for parking with the phones. I always call the few times that I do it, because I don't like downloading the app. It takes me about 20 seconds. Once I registered, they've got my credit card number. They give me the lot number, the parking spot number, and how long do you want to park, and it's done. So using a smart or a not smartphone is not hard to do. I'm surprised we're getting as much money from the fines. That's a lot, actually, compared to some organizations I've seen. So, but I appreciate what you're doing, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. All right. Everybody good?
Lee? Nothing?
Okay, cool. Speak now, forever hold your peace. All right, item, and I guess we have more of these to go yet, right? We'll actually have a budget hearing next. Okay. I think we gave everyone plenty of things to look into and prepare for prior to the next one. So we're going to go now to under new business, item B, executive session announcement by our city land use attorney.
And since the land use attorney's not here, I'm parroting what she typed out for us because technically I have that conflict on this case, so just think of me as Ms. Kopp while I'm reading this. But the city land use attorney desires advice concerning the litigation and is requesting an executive session to be held at 7:55 p.m. on August 20th, 2018 regarding the following case. BI Inc., Dewey Destin Harborside LLC plaintiff versus City of Destin, Florida defendant in the Circuit County Court of the First Judicial Circuit, NM4, Okaloosa County, Florida, case number 2016 CA 00362F. The subject matter of the meeting shall be confined to settlement negotiations or strategy sessions related to litigation expenditures, and the entire session shall be recorded by a certified court reporter. The executive session will be attended by Mayor Gary Jarvis, council members Chad Morgan, Kyron Marler, Skip Overdyer, Tuffy Dixon, Preble Ramswell, and Rodney Braden, and William Warner, litigation attorney for the city, Kimberly Kopp, city land use attorney, and Lance Johnson, interim city manager.
Ma'am, I mean...
we did have one question, though, at the 7:55 p.m.
Yes,
time
that was announced.
That's something we can change. Y'all can decide y'all want to do a different time right now. Don't vote. Just give me direction, and I'll announce the new time.
Oh, we have that joint meeting prior, and we're going to be very lucky to get that done in an hour. And so basically, they're going to hold the mayor to a 2-hour time limit for the regular meeting, which I think I could do. And then we could do that particular meeting. And if we have any unfinished business, because we won't adjourn the regular city council meeting, we will just have to break, right?
Yeah, actually, all you have to do, you don't have to break at 7:55. You just cannot start that meeting before 7:55 PM. So if you set it at 6, the only thing Ray was concerned about was the court reporter would be sitting here as soon as the time we put down there, and she'll be running the clock the whole time at 125 an hour. So we were trying to peg it as close to the actual start time as possible. But so there's no harm in setting it earlier. There's only harm in setting it too late in the evening. So.
Any comments on that, folks? I mean, we probably got quite a few things on the agenda, but I think, my only concern is if we go over on the joint where we don't start at 6 o'clock, because then now we're going to be getting past 7:55 is my only concern. I'm open for suggestions there, folks, on this one. Sounds like a plan, so let's just stick with that.
7:55 PM?
Yes, we'll just go that route. And I think prior to our previous time we met, I don't think we're going to have to be in there very long to discuss what we have to discuss. So hopefully we can press on pretty good. So yeah, let's just stick with that. And I don't think we need a motion or anything.
Can't make motions at workshops. And then there was one extra matter, Mayor Jarvis, that I'd actually emailed out to all the council earlier, and I reminded you about before we started. The Jane Evans, the Restore Act coordinator for the county, I've never actually been given like a formal directive to invite her to come to City Council to explain to y'all the Restore Act process, so y'all have those questions answered. If I get enough head nods, I'll invite her to come as soon as she possibly can. There, yeah, it's part of, yeah, okay, so, yeah.
Can you ask her to come to the joint meeting?
Yeah.
Because it would really be beneficial if she could lay out everything before the Harbor CRA. I'm going to do my best to try to keep it.
What time did we set the joint?
Well, the only thing is, I think she can give us just a real clear outline of this is how it's worked. And then if anybody's got any questions about the questions we have, are we going to lose a grant? Can we refile? I think she could probably give us everything we need to hear from her in 5 minutes. So if possible, could you have her for the joint meeting?
And if she can't, what I'll do, I know the general questions y'all have, I'll have her provide the answers to me, and then also have her come as soon as she possibly can. Maybe it's the next meeting, but I'll try to get her to come to the joint meeting if possible.
That would be really, really beneficial. Skip? All right, so that being said, I think we covered everything, and Preble packed up all her stuff, so I think I'm going to adjourn this meeting. What was all that stuff?